Welcome back, everybody, to Pantsuits and Lawsuits. I'm Kris Mays, the Attorney General of Arizona.
And I'm Dana Nessel, Michigan Attorney General.
And we hope that you all had an awesome summer break. It's been Dana, it's been a little hot out here as it usually is. I don't know how your summer's gone, but
it's been hot out here as well.
Really?
Yeah, and we get so few months that are this enjoyable. But yesterday, like several other days, I was unable to go outside and take a nice walk. Not because of the temperature, but because of the Canadian wildfires, which make it impossible for people to safely go out and enjoy the outdoors because climate change is real.
Yep. And we have had, as you know, the catastrophic fires up at the Grand Canyon, the northern rim of the Grand Canyon, which has destroyed a number of historic structures and is still going on. I think the containment rate is very, very low, maybe only 4%. So interesting. Same thing happening in both of our in our states, near our states. But
yeah, we've been having massive flooding here. I know obviously the national media has been really tuned in terms of what's been going on in Texas for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But it's happening all the time now.
Wow.
We don't get regular rainfalls anymore.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I didn't realize that. Well, it is good to be back with you. It's good to be back with our viewers and listeners and our regular programming here as the summer kind of starts to slide away. But I think we wanted to do a whole episode taking stock of what has happened, what's going on with the litigation that we're involved in to try to save our country and save our democracy.
Yeah, and Trump has been in office now just a little bit over 6 months. And I don't know about you, AG Mays, but this has definitely been the busiest 6 months of my career.
It has made what is already a busy job with enormous responsibilities even busier. I don't know about your team, but we are working basically 7 days a week. Sometimes it feels like 24 hours a day, but we've, have been having to work overtime on the litigation to try to spare our states from unmentionable, unbelievable harm coming out of Washington, D.C., and more unconstitutional behavior than I think we've ever seen out of any executive in the history of the country.
Oh, perhaps combined.
Combined, I mean,
Honestly,
yeah, that's
all of the administrations that came before the Trump administration, including Trump 1.0. And I will say this, of course, because I was around for the last 2 years of Trump 1.0. And
right.
Of course, he didn't come into office until later. But my God, what I wouldn't do for, the first Trump administration, and which was, by the way, COVID times. It wasn't exactly a walk in the park. But it was nothing compared to what we're seeing right now. And I think that is, of course, by design.
Can you speak more to that? So what is that just the sheer volume and ferocity of it sort of compared, because you all during that time, it's my understanding, filed more than 100 lawsuits against Trump, winning more than 80%. Is it just the volume here at the front on the front end of his term that's different, or just the sheer unconstitutionality of all of it?
I mean, I think it's both. And I think the other part about it is that before, of course, you had more congressional pushback on so many different things. But you also had his own administration pushing back. So what you would see time and time again is I think he would want to do something that was clearly illegal, clearly unconstitutional, and he got talked out of it oftentimes by his own staff. Or you would see a turnover. So you'd see person after person leaving the administration, in large part, I think, because they refused to engage in these illegal activities. Now you don't see that anymore. So there's not really a pushback internally. And as a result, you're just seeing more and more of this really dangerous conduct So I think we're seeing all of that, and as a result, obviously, you and I and our many Democratic colleagues have been incredibly busy. But I think this is an important thing to note, incredibly successful. I know that we tend to
Yeah,
dwell on the cases that were not successful. And to be clear, it's not as though any of these cases have been litigated all the way through on the merits.
right,
So success or failure to succeed is really based on these preliminary injunctions, which again, that's not the true test of the success of a lawsuit. It's what the final outcome is. But that's sort of
right.
how we've been measuring it in those terms. And boy, we've had a lot of wins.
I mean, we really have. When you look at it, I think we are maintaining, if you look at the preliminary injunction or a TRO as a win, or at least a preliminary win, which I think it is, which is to stop the bad thing that Trump is doing, whether it's ripping funding away from education, or trying to eliminate birthright citizenship, or taking funding away from health providers and healthcare. We have stopped that, at least preliminarily, in I would say about 80% of the time. We're trying to check that. We have had a few losses. We can talk about those on this episode that are disappointing, but we're stopping a lot of the bad stuff.
Yeah.
And or at least slowing it down. And that's really important because it's unconstitutional,
And
and that's
I
our
think that
job.
it bears noting to say that many of the cases that we've brought, the Trump administration has just completely given up on.
Right. I think that's
So
important. I think that's an important point because what I don't know if about you, but what I am noticing, and this is really interesting, is we'll get them stopped at the district court level, and then they'll kind of slink away a little bit sometimes.
mhm.
Not all the time. Sometimes in a couple of cases they have filed an appeal upwards. We can talk about the shadow docket and the Department of Education case, which was so awful, the decision out of the Supreme Court. But I think they're kind of saying, maybe we don't want to pursue this. Maybe they don't have the resources to pursue it on appeal. Or maybe if you're a 35 or 45-year-old lawyer working for the Department of Justice, you don't want to make bad faith claims and put yourself at risk of maybe losing your law license down the road. I mean, there is that.
Yeah, and the other thing I think that we're seeing is, just so many really talented, AUSAs, who work for the Department of Justice, so many talented attorneys that have left. So
Right,
these are lawyers who proudly worked for the Department of Justice. They don't feel comfortable doing that anymore because, again, they don't
right,
want to violate their oath of office by lying to a court, by providing inaccurate information that they know is not honest and forthright, and that violates their oath as an attorney that each of us have to take as an attorney.
right,
Or even we have to take an oath not to file frivolous
right,
claims. So there's many things that we do as a lawyer, but what I've seen is many of those attorneys have left. They've not been able to replace them with equally competent, certainly not equally experienced attorneys. And as a result, by us filing as many cases as we're filing, and again, always legitimately so with
yeah.
viable claims, they just can't keep up. So that's another thing. It's yes, we have winning arguments, but, I don't think the DOJ even has the staff necessarily to keep up with the number of lawsuits because it's not just us filing the lawsuits, of course. You have
No, it's true.
many different entities that are doing that and a lot of talented lawyers that are fighting back against this lawless administration.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. Obviously, that we are representing 23 different states that are putting up a fight against the lawlessness, but there's a lot of organizations out there that are also filing lawsuits on behalf of, for instance, public workers, um, and I think, they've also filed more, I mean, at least more than 100 lawsuits. So it's a lot. And when people ask me, well, gosh, Kris, that's 25. I think we've filed 25 lawsuits. Danny, I think you're a little bit north of that.
Correct. I think today we filed two today. So, and that's
Wow.
not unusual, by the way, right? For us
Yeah,
to
sometimes.
um, do, sometimes three, four a week.
Yeah.
That has happened. So I think we're at 29 now, I want to say, as of
Yeah.
today.
Somebody wrote out here that I'm averaging one a week. And I had a conservative talk show host kind of nip at my heels about that the other day, and I'm gonna go on his show because I like him so much. But he's like, "Well, why is Kris Mayes filing so many lawsuits against Donald Trump?" And doesn't this mean she hates Donald Trump? No, I don't. This is not about that. This is about upholding the Constitution. And if the roles were reversed and this was a Democratic president violating the Constitution pretty much every week, for instance, trying to override the Second Amendment, I'm pretty sure these very same people would be saying, "Why aren't you suing the president to uphold the Constitution?" So
Well, but
that's
let's
what
be
we're doing.
clear, it's of course more than that. It's protecting our state residents against harm, which
Yes,
is sort of the point of us as attorneys general in our capacities of course, it's our obligation to represent our states, and we also have our parents patriae authority to represent the people of our
yes.
respective states.
Do you
But
want to speak to that? I know I heard you guys calculated the amount of money that you have saved Michiganders, and we have calculated the amount of money that we have saved Arizonans as a result of these lawsuits.
So, a conservative estimate for the state of Michigan is so far, these lawsuits have saved us north of $1.6 billion, billion with a B. That's money that was being wrongfully, illegally withheld from the state of Michigan by the federal government.
Right?
We filed lawsuit. We got either a TRO or a preliminary injunction, and a court ordered the federal government to release the money to us. And that money now is in our state coffers or to other entities like independent school districts or
Right.
local health departments. They have the money now that they were legally entitled to instead of it being withheld wrongly by the federal government. That's a lot of money.
Yeah. So you're a little bit north of Arizona. We calculated conservatively, I think, $1.2 billion saved for Arizonans, for our universities, for health programs, for libraries, for our schools. I think that's a perfect lawsuit to highlight right now. My daughter's about to go back to school next week, and our schools were about to be denied by the Trump administration if it weren't for our lawsuit, $132 million for after school programs, and teacher support programs. Even in Arizona, Dana, they were going to defund school safety officers, police officers. Again, another example of Donald Trump defunding the police, which is insane. And they were going to defund our homeland security and cybersecurity programs here in Arizona. And we stopped that.
Well, why it's more important than ever is our calculus is because of the big, beautiful bill, which I can't believe we have to call it that because it's ridiculous. Instead of just calling it the budget, as is normally done.
Let's call it the big bill for billionaires.
Yeah, that's what we really should call it. But the projections are that for the upcoming fiscal year, because of that bill, the state of Michigan is to lose $1.1 billion. And why? Well, it's a combination of things. It's some of the funding that we're going to have to make up for in things like SNAP benefits and Medicaid. But in addition to that, it's the loss in revenue because now, of course, billionaires are not going to be paying taxes at the same rate. Corporations will be paying less in taxes, not regular people, not you, me, and all the other
Right.
regular folks out there, but for really rich people and for big corporations, they will be paying less. And so how do we make up for that loss in $1.1 billion? I don't know, but the good thing is, state of Michigan, now at least there's this extra $1.6 billion that we didn't lose that we otherwise would have.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. Like the compounding effect of what we would have lost if we hadn't filed these lawsuits, your 30 lawsuits, or your 29 lawsuits, my 25 lawsuits. The compounding effect of that loss plus the big bill for billionaires, which slashes Medicaid and SNAP benefits and is gonna blow a hole in our budgets. I mean, that is gonna happen. Um, is would have been absolutely catastrophic. And you know, the other interesting thing that I think goes really unreported on with regard to the big bill for billionaires, and tax cuts for billionaires is the impact that it's going to have on law enforcement in our states. So I've talked to a number of sheriffs and chiefs, police chiefs, who said, "Hey, Kris, you know, we're going to get hit when that thing goes into effect. We are going to lose money for mental health care funding for jail reentry programs. So, you know, trying to treat folks as they're leaving jail so that they don't recidivate, so they don't come back. Um, and then just the what the loss of mental health care and Medicaid will do in terms of crime,
Oh
you
yeah,
know?
crime is going to skyrocket. There are
Totally.
so many people that the only reason why they're not committing crimes right now is because they've received the treatment that so many
Right.
people badly need. Mental health treatment, as you said, substance abuse treatment, all kinds of things that they're now not
Right.
going to receive because they're going to get cut off of Medicaid. So it's not just that we're not saving money by cutting people off of Medicaid. It's going to cost us so much more money societally in a different way, many different ways, not to mention all the additional crime victims. And now the loss, because when you have a person who's been injured during a crime, or you have a person who, from a mental health perspective, now, they're suffering and they
Hmm.
can't work or they need additional services because they're a crime victim. I mean, just the domino effect goes on and on. But I do want to talk about something about when you talk about how many, like, why are you suing so much? Why are you involved in so many lawsuits? Well, let's talk about the CASA case, the
Yeah.
birthright citizenship case, because again, they did not reach the merits of
Right.
whether or not the 14th Amendment encapsulates birthright citizenship and whether that can be undone with an executive order by the president or not, which clearly it can't. But the most important part of that, of course, ended up being that if you, as a state, were not involved as a plaintiff in a lawsuit,
Right.
that you weren't necessarily going to be entitled to relief because there had to be various different circumstances under which you could have what we have traditionally referred to as a national restraining order or injunction and the limited circumstances under which that could occur. And because of that, right, because the court is saying to us, you better be a plaintiff in that case, or we don't know that you're going to be entitled to relief. Now, if the calculus was, okay, is this a lawsuit we should join or not join? We got what, 14, 15, 16 other states that are doing it. You know, in terms of our claims, are our claims perfect? Or is our standing, has that been perfected yet? In some cases, we have to say, we're going to go ahead, we will develop all of the facts that we need later, but we have
Hmm.
to be involved in this because where if there is injunctive relief granted and we're not a plaintiff to this lawsuit, then our states are going to be left out.
Right. I mean, that's exactly what the Supreme Court just set up with that decision. As you pointed out, it was a really more of a procedural decision in the birthright citizenship case, which they did not reach the merits on. I mean, presumably they're going to have to at some point because they bounced it back to the original courts. And of course, we've now received again decisions from those courts saying, yes, birthright citizenship exists in the 14th Amendment. So, that's going to have to they're going to have to take that up, one would presume, at some point. Um, but to your point, it, boy, it just made with that one decision saying, hey, the Supreme Court saying, hey, we disfavor nationwide injunctions, and we really think this needs to be just about our decisions by federal district court judges need to be just about the plaintiff states or the plaintiffs in the case, just made who sits in these seats that you and I are sitting in right now a heck of a lot more important.
And
Because because if
sorry.
the AG isn't entering the state in the case, then your state is not covered. Just imagine all those Republican states, all those red states with Republican AGs who are not litigating right now with us to protect their states. They're left naked.
That's right. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Trump administration is caving so often, because they know because there's not going to be national relief granted, and it's only going to go to the plaintiff states, which are only going to be Democrats, because Republicans are so terrified to
Right.
stand up to the Trump administration that they are getting these calls behind the scenes saying, like, that's not fair. Why is Arizona and Michigan getting the benefit of the relief granted, but we're not here in Missouri or Florida or Texas?
Right.
And that's a problem, and obviously it's causing great consternation for the states that have Democratic governors but Republican attorneys general, Pennsylvania
Right.
and Kentucky and
Kentucky.
Kansas.
Yep.
So, what I have to say to those states is, if you really want to be protected against these illegal acts by the federal government that's hurting your states, go get yourself a Democratic AG who will actually stand up to this
Right.
administration on behalf of the people that they represent, meaning their own constituents in their own states.
Yeah. It's really interesting. And we haven't always sought in our cases, the ones that we've brought together, nationwide injunctions. We have sometimes sought injunctions just for our states. But there are situations, and I'm going to be so interested to see what the Supreme Court does about this. Situations and cases like birthright citizenship, where if you don't have a nationwide injunction, how bizarre is that going to be? I mean,
What about
we,
tariffs?
or
Like,
tariffs,
how could
right?
you possibly, like, what's going to happen with tariffs? How do you say, all right, if you have items that come into ports in, Washington,
Right.
or in New York, which have joined these, those items will not be subject to these tariffs that say they continue to be struck down. I know there's a stay. There was an argument in the Court of Appeals in the District of Columbia that I hear went very well. Uh, the arguments made by the state coalition,
Yeah.
but will the other states, if you have merchandise that's shipped to other states, I
I mean,
mean,
it's completely unworkable. Yeah. And by the
yeah.
way, the arguments did go well. I listened to them because, I'm one of the states, along with Oregon, leading that tariffs case. That was argued in front of the Federal Circuit Court, U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. It took the Court of International Trade decision, which was also good for us. We won there. Then it got stayed temporarily. But boy, I got to tell you, Dana. When you listen to the judges on that panel, it certainly, I mean, we don't want to predict anything here, but it certainly felt good for us. And those judges were very skeptical that the president's use of IEPA, that Donald Trump's use of IEPA was lawful. I mean, one of the judges said it doesn't even mention the word tariffs in it. But anyway, getting back to your point, I don't know. It's completely unworkable. Birthright citizenship also completely unworkable. A baby is born in Texas, and because Texas didn't enter into our lawsuit, that baby is stateless, but the baby born in Arizona is an American citizen because she was born in Arizona. And what happens if a baby moves from Texas to Arizona or from Texas to Michigan?
Well, and to be clear, when our respective states and our coalition on the two different lawsuits that were brought by Democratic AGs went back to court and made that argument, the courts agreed and said, you're right, this
Right,
still injures your states because, for instance, in the state of Michigan, you could be in a county that borders Ohio or borders Indiana. And, when it comes to getting to the closest hospital, you might end up going to the state of Ohio or the state of Indiana, who did not participate in our lawsuits. And that hurts you as a Michigan resident because, some things are out of your control. And when you go back to Michigan, now your child, who, if they would have been born in the state you live in, would have had American citizenship, but because they were born across the border, they don't. That's still an injury to our state residents.
right,
So as a result of that, there is a national injunction that was
right.
imposed in both of the cases that were brought, both your case and my case.
Yep,
So, so there are instances, of course, but the court was specific, the Supreme Court, that won't always be the case. You have to be able to make that argument.
yep,
Otherwise, it won't be a national injunction. So
yeah.
good to
I
know. And
mean,
I think we do have to, before we get into all of our giant wins, which I do want to talk about case by case so people can clearly understand just how strong our lawsuits were and impactful and effective. I do think, unfortunately, we should talk about the Department of Education shadow docket ruling by the United States
yes,
Supreme Court.
yes. Can I say I brought a prop for you?
Please, I love props. The shadow docket. Who's that by?
Yes. This is a great book by Stephen Vladeck, who's been studying the shadow docket for a long time. I don't know why I have a sign here sticker on it, but obviously I had to sign something recently. But
Wait,
yeah, it's
are you
a
signing on behalf of that author
yeah,
or is that
no,
for that author? Like, could you sign my book, but right here, please?
yeah, I liked it so much. But anyway, he writes about and is a scholar who's written a lot about the development, the rise of the shadow docket, and how it's such a departure, a terrible departure, really, from Supreme Court practice in the past, where they're taking cases, they're sort of snatching up cases on emergency appeals, and then issuing decisions without any explanation, and the normal process, which is usually there's oral arguments and there's a written decision that follows for cases, the rare cases that the United States Supreme Court takes up. But as you pointed out, we were the victim of the shadow docket in the DOE, one of the DOE cases, because we
Right.
have we have won several DOE cases,
Mhm.
but the DOE case where we sued to stop the Trump administration from basically dismantling it, and
Yeah. And I mean, the whole point is, right, in getting a preliminary injunction, really, what the lower court, the district court, and then the Court of Appeals has said is that A, the states are likely to win this case, and
right,
B, that if there is not this injunctive relief granted immediately, meaning if immediately we're not telling the Department of Education you can't lay off half your staff, that there will be immediate and irreparable harm done to the Department of Education. And so I think that the point obviously we were making is that, like, if you lay off all those people, that harm is going to happen as soon as they're laid off. And I think that was to be done on August 1st.
right.
And once some harms, like once it's done, it's
It's
over.
done.
And it's really hard, it's a Humpty Dumpty type of
Uh,
situation. Once that egg is shattered all over the place, it's really hard to put it back together. And it's the same thing for the Department of Education. And that's why we felt it was so important and we were so relieved when we got the preliminary injunction on that case saying, no, no, no. The
yeah,
harm is not keeping the Department of Education running as it has for so many years. The harm would be totally dismantling it. And then if we went on to win later. And, again, a congressionally created body that
Yeah.
was, that requires an act of Congress to dismantle. But then, in effect, by laying off half the people, really what you're doing is you are dismantling the Department of Education in effect.
Yeah. I mean, it's a de facto destruction, elimination of an agency that Congress created and Congress funded. And so the decision by the Supreme Court is just, inexplicable to me. How they, well, it's also inexplicable because they didn't explain it
That's right. There was no explanation provided. So,
because it was on the shadow docket.
right. And for a lot of people, of course, and I thought this was interesting because this had a direct impact on later our case against the Department of Health and Human Services because the attorneys for the government went back and said, ha ha, the shadow docket allowed us to dismantle the Department of Education. Now we're telling the court to do the same thing with the Department of Health and Human Services.
Hmm.
And the judge in that case, I thought was interesting, was like, I'm not using that as precedent. They didn't say why. They didn't say what factors they took into consideration. They didn't
Right,
provide any information of all at all of any kind. So how am I supposed to use that to apply it to this case? There is no
right.
way to do that. And so a lot of the lower court judges were like, look, shadow docket, you do what you're going to do, but I can't use that in any significant way that I'm legally required to do a proper analysis for this other case.
Yeah, I think that is a very good summary of it. But yeah, so that was a major bummer to say the least. Um, and but to your point, I think maybe we don't do a very good job sometimes, and sometimes it's just hard given the news cycle of explaining why. Because there's probably a lot of people out there who are saying, "Oh, does it really matter what happens to a bunch of federal workers in Washington, D.C. inside the Department of Education?" Yes, it does really matter. Because if those people are not there, then funding, how can we be assured that the funding that goes to our local schools is going to get there? And that the services that they rely on by virtue of the funding that comes out and the programs that come out of the Department of Education will actually get done. How do you do
Yeah.
that?
And who's going to enforce the
Right,
laws
right,
that, apply to every single state? They're like, they're the sheriffs, right? That go in and, if a school district is not, um, you know, allowing a child that has, say, an IEP, has been assigned
right.
that, and has certain programming that he or she is entitled to, who's going to enforce that? In Michigan, now I can tell you who it is. It's nobody. And I say that because they have completely dismantled the regional offices that oversee some of those programs for the state of Michigan. And, I say this, and I think I've talked about it before. One of, my sons had an IEP, and thank God
Hmm.
he did, because he
Hmm.
absolutely needed it because of his profound learning disability. And now he graduated from college with a 4.0 because he got the assistance that he badly needed. But that would have never happened if he did not get this programming. But the thing is, if you were going to shut down and dismantle the Department of Education, first make provisions for all those other things and say how
Yes.
the states are going to get the money that they're entitled to, that again is routed through the Department of Education, and say, here's how we're going to make sure that those programs are properly implemented. But that's not how this administration works. They don't
No,
say,
no.
okay, we want to get rid of the Department of Education, but let's make sure that we're doing it the right way, and let's make sure that we have all our bases covered. They're like, nope, just get rid of it, and whatever happens, happens. I don't care, is really
Yeah.
what they're saying.
No, I mean he's Captain Chaos. So that's what it's all about for them. But yeah, so that was not a good one for us, but we have had a lot of other good ones. We've
That's
had a lot
right.
of wins. As we mentioned, of course, the tariffs case is rolling rolling along. That will make it to the Supreme Court. I am almost certain. I'm sure you are too. I think we should point out, Dana, that here we are with a jobs report that just came out today, showing that our the number of jobs that were added in the economy is way below this last month than what economists were expecting. And, you know, we have several major corporations, like the ones that make Dawn dish soap, Charmin toilet paper, Crest toothpaste, and Tide detergent. I use all of those. I don't know about you, but
We use all those too in our household.
yep,
So
pretty much everybody. Yeah. Are raising their prices because of tariffs. The tariffs that we are trying to fight that we believe were illegally imposed. And other major retailers are probably going to follow suit. And we know he just yesterday announced a whole new slew of tariffs, illegal tariffs, on top of the old tariffs, which were on top of the old tariffs. And so it's just so chaotic. And I'm looking at, um, oh, we've got a breaking news here, Dana,
what's that?
that Trump has just announced he's firing the U.S. Labor Statistics Commissioner for reporting that jobs numbers are weak under his watch.
I mean,
So
I'm
let's
sorry,
let's fire the
this is
messenger. Let's fire the U.S. Labor Statistics Commissioner.
this is like a Borat movie is really the best thing that I could compare it to, really. I mean, honestly, or it's like any sort of satiric take on North Korea. You know? I mean, did you see that they just in the Smithsonian
Yes, I was
had
going to bring
made
that up.
yeah,
They
to
just took out a mention of the impeachment proceedings against Trump
right. You can leave the one in for Bill Clinton, but you have to remove the
and Nixon,
ones.
right?
Yeah,
Let's
and Nixon, uh, but I mean, it's rewriting history. And now if you don't like a statistic that exists, or if facts are inconvenient for you because they don't fit your narrative of how you think you're running the country, just fire the statistician. I mean, it's like you can't make this up. But the sad
you,
part is, if we were Turkmenistan, right? And
right.
they're and one could argue that they're just as crazy, then that would be bad. But
I don't know.
Turkmenistan,
I think you might be sullying the name of Turkmenistan there.
well,
I mean,
you
I
got
don't.
to read a little bit more about Turkmenistan though. But we're fast
Okay.
approaching Turkmenistan. But the thing is like the rest of the world, it's very bad for the Turkmenistanians,
Danians.
I assume. But
Yeah,
it didn't have this kind of real world impact for every other country in the world. But the
right.
United States, whether it's our military, whether it's economically, whether it's the perspective of all our scientific research. I mean, what happens in America doesn't stay in America. It has an
No.
impact all across the globe. So when you have this kind of ridiculousness at play, it's injurious to everyone on the planet.
Yeah. No, and let me tell you, my heart goes out right now to all the kids graduating from college into this labor market and into a world in which the president is responding to it by firing the statistician of America. Not sure that's a great approach, and I feel for all the moms and dads out there and all the kids graduating from college who are looking for jobs in a market where we're not creating jobs. Why? Because of these ridiculous tariffs and a herky-jerky economic policy. But I mean, it's
Well,
not even an economic
yeah.
policy,
And you know how we solve the climate change problem? We just don't talk about it anymore, and then it doesn't exist.
right?
Isn't that great?
Well, uh-huh. Yeah. And let's eliminate all funding for clean energy projects in the country. And let's not talk about it and let's not use the word climate change. That's what they're doing. But anyway, we digress a little bit, I guess. But we did want to talk about some of our big wins. We have had some huge wins that add up to that 1.2 billion or 1.8 billion for you guys. And I don't know where you want to start because there's been a lot of them.
Yeah, well, I think just running through them, and these are just the ones. Obviously, there are more lawsuits than this, but if you just want to look at it from a financial standpoint, I
Yeah.
mean, my gosh, the OMB lawsuit, the
Oh,
Office of Management and Budget, where all of a sudden, there was an immediate pause without explanation
yep.
for federal funding for all of our most important state programs.
It was insane. I mean, we're talking, I know for you guys as well, but for Arizona, we were talking about SNAP, Head Start, Section 8 housing, LIHEAP for, people to be able to keep their air conditioning on in the summertime, rural health clinics. Our access portal went down. That's our Medicaid program went down for a day. And then they were gonna, I know I've told you this before, they were going to defund our efforts in Arizona to combat the Mexican drug cartels and the fentanyl crisis. That was Donald Trump defunding the police.
Yeah, and
But we
and
got
for
that
Michigan,
stopped.
yep, 42% of our budget came from that federal funding. Can you imagine losing 42% of your budget literally overnight?
That it's nuts. It's
But
insane. So
fortunately, we were able to get all those programs restarted. And some of them were restarted almost immediately. Others, it took a little bit of time, but we got it
mhm.
done. So that was a significant win for us, no question about it.
That was a big one. Another big one, I think, was the NIH lawsuit. We know that they tried to cut an enormous amount of funding for our universities and for our universities via NIH. We're in Arizona, we were looking at $170 million for the U of A, $65 million for ASU, 14 million for NAU. They were kind of this would have crippled Alzheimer's funding research in Arizona. We do a lot of Alzheimer's research in Arizona for a lot of reasons.
Yeah,
But
well, in Michigan, it was $225 million. And remember, that was, a memo that came out on a Friday night. We filed a lawsuit on a Monday morning and we got a TRO later that day so that
yep,
none of the money actually ended up being lost, thankfully. But for us, I mean, that's a significant amount of people, not just cancer research, cancer treatment. These are people in
right.
experimental programs that without those programs, they would literally die. And, the Trump administration thought nothing of the significant harm. Fortunately, you and I both filed lawsuits right away, and we didn't see that harm occur, at
But
least at
again,
that time.
Dana, going back to the fact that some of these all the Republican states are not participating in this. I remember Katie Britt, the senator from I think Alabama, complaining about how her University of Alabama was going to be hammered by this, and I remember thinking, well, hello, Katie. You need to talk to your attorney general over there who refused to join our lawsuit.
Yeah, I just couldn't imagine any Democratic president, causing this kind of harm to our states without us standing up to him or her.
I
And
agree.
with
I
the
agree.
Republicans, though, it's just fall in line. The end. The another case that was really impactful, of course, was our a case involving public health grants.
Yep.
And I know both of our states were significantly impacted, but we were able to get injunctive relief, and finally the money got released. And for Michigan, that was $379.3 million for programs affecting, mental health for youth, substance abuse treatment, control of infectious diseases, direct care for patients. List goes on and on.
Yeah, same for I mean we were gonna lose out on $239 million for many of the same kinds of programs, including our tribal partners. So huge impacts on that one. Thank God we prevailed.
And we had, of course, our seven agencies lawsuit, which sounds a little confusing, but one of the worst impacts would have been to our libraries and all
Right,
kinds of libraries, by the way, right? So
right.
libraries in that are in our schools, your local library, state libraries, you name it. We were able to get injunctive relief, and in Michigan, we saved what was 75% of all funding for school libraries and public libraries and all the rest, which was about $5 million.
Yeah. I mean, a very similar situation in Arizona, and I think anybody who lives in rural Arizona, knows how important our libraries are here in Arizona, in rural Arizona, rural America. And here we had $18 million in this kind of funding that we would have lost. And for a number of different programs. And Arizona, we gathered this statistic. Arizona has 3 million library card holders, 3 million, who in 2023 alone visited the library 14 million times. So libraries do still matter. They matter.
Yeah, they sure do. There was the ESSER funds lawsuit, and I know people don't always know, this is Title I money, meaning it's money that goes to our school districts. And this was money already spent by our
Right.
school districts. And in Michigan, that was $25 million that we were able to recover of money that was, again, already spent to improve things like HVAC systems, air conditioning, heating, all types of, filtration systems. That was, again, these schools, they applied for the money. They spent time, money, effort, resources to apply for those money. They spent the money. The money was due to be reimbursed to them. And then the federal government was like, yoink, just kidding. You're not getting reimbursed after all. It's like a Scooby-Doo episode for some reason. But
Yeah.
but so that was $25 million for Michigan.
Yeah. Very similar situation here in Arizona, and that would have hit our rural areas very, very hard. So that was a huge one.
We had, and I know that obviously every state is different, but there was a Title VI
Yep.
education funds that in Michigan would have resulted. I mean, there's nearly $1.3 billion in school funding that gets awarded through that program, but we were able, and it involves support for students in foster care and low income households and teacher training and all the rest. And we were set to lose that money. And then after we filed this lawsuit, the Trump administration just decided to drop the whole thing.
Yeah,
So
that's a huge win. We were not part of that one. That was one of the few lawsuits I think that we weren't part of, but for standing reasons, I think. Another one that was a huge win for all of us was the our ability to stop the dismantling of AmeriCorps. And that preliminary injunction was granted on June 5th. And AmeriCorps had invested more than 23, well, almost $24 million in Arizona and had engaged more than 4,800 members and Arizona seniors in their work all throughout our state. They were at our universities doing incredible work for our state. So,
absolutely. There was a $15 million in AmeriCorps funding in Michigan. And it was really nice because just on Saturday, actually, I was at an event and I ran into a young man who had just graduated from college and was already set up with an AmeriCorps job. And he, thought he lost his job. And then he said to me, but now I just found out that I'm got my job back. I'm going back to work thanks to your lawsuit. So it was nice because like
wow.
you don't always get to hear those stories.
Yeah.
You get to hear lots of mean comments about days that your hair doesn't look that good or how much you've aged while you've been in office, but you don't always get that. So it was a nice treat for me to actually hear that story from a young man that was doing some really great work in the community and now was going to be able to restart that work.
I have a tip for you on those negative comments. Don't read the comments on social media. So
No, I know you keep
I,
saying that and I keep
that
trying.
yeah, I know it's hard. It's hard. But yeah. So I mean, we can go on and on. I know we're probably running low on time, but there are some others we really should talk about because of the impact on all the states. Trump wanted to dismantle HHS. We got a preliminary injunction to stop them on July 1st. They were going to lay off the entire staff of LIHEAP. That's again the program. I mean, it's crazy. This is a program that is used by so many low-income folks, working Americans who need help with their utility bills. And
Yeah.
so many other things that we were able to stop by stopping the dismantling of the Department of Health and Human Services.
All right. By the way, I saw a special on a young man who demonstrated what it was like to live in Arizona without air conditioning for, I think it was like
Really?
90
Uh,
days or something. And I think I'm going to
That's
stay in Michigan, I think, as it turns out.
that's
But
hard
that
to,
being the case, there's a lot of people that would freeze to death. Literally, families
yeah,
that need that assistance would freeze to death in the winter, but for having that assistance. And sadly, the Trump administration doesn't care if people freeze to death. I mean, let's just
yeah.
say it how it is.
That's insane. It's just it's absolutely crazy. What else do you want to call
Well,
out?
I think all, obviously, you talk a lot and so do I about the impacts to things like the Department of Transportation or to
Right.
FEMA, right?
Mm-hmm.
For,
FEMA.
emergency financial and the cases that we've had where the, Trump administration will just all of a sudden add conditions that never existed before. And they'll say, hey, road worker, I know you're there to help with infrastructure. You're literally filling potholes so that people don't get into car accidents. But instead, we're going to make you do immigration enforcement. And if you
Yeah.
don't, you're going to lose all the money. And for our Department of Transportation on a case that we brought, in June, that was $520 million to the Michigan
Wow.
Department of Transportation that would have gone to our state's roads, highways, railways, et cetera, et cetera. And, as a result of our lawsuit, that didn't happen. And, there are so many lawsuits that are data privacy related that we brought, right?
Yeah. I think we should talk a little bit about that too, because I have to tell you, living here in Arizona, which we tend to be kind of a libertarian oriented state, kind of live and let live, stay out of my business, stay out of my data, hands off my data. And as you know, we have been suing pretty much every time the Trump administration tries to hoover up people's private data out of various federal agencies and programs. And that seems to be happening an awful lot lately. You and I, we fought Doge on several fronts. They were trying to hoover up data inside Treasury. And now ICE and DHS are trying to take data out of the Medicaid program, and they are trying to take data from the SNAP program, basically
Yeah.
food security. And what I would remind people, and obviously the belief is that they're trying to do this so that they can go after immigrants. Right now, it sure looks like they're not going after criminals so much as just gardeners and people who work in car washes and people who work on farms and people who are working on construction. But when they hoover up this data on SNAP, Medicaid, Treasury Department, IRS, they're hoovering up all of the data. That's
That's right.
everybody. And I
So
can
for
tell
all of
you,
the American citizens who think that their very personal information, which is
yes,
extensive in order to participate in these programs, that's why it has such a low fraud rate, because there's so much information that you have to provide about yourself, including
right.
all your medical bills you have to provide, you have your landlord, leases and contracts. I mean, just the list goes on and on. And we know how hard our states work to protect this information, it goes to the
Yes.
federal government now. I don't know if it's going into the hands of some,
Who
20-year
knows?
old who hasn't been properly vetted, and what the completely like unsecure server systems it will go to, because we have strict rules about that in Michigan. I know you do too in Arizona. With
Yeah.
the federal government, it's just a free for all. So you might think that I'm participating in this program and my information is only going to go to the administrators in our states of those programs. But now they're saying, no, 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 you have to share this information, not just with ICE, but with everybody.
No, I mean, and then I really think we have to consider, and I know people in Arizona are thinking about this. What are they doing with it? This is the sheer volume of this data and the amount of the data that they are clearly going after. What is happening to it? How is it being vacuumed up? There's been speculation about whether companies like Palantir or others might be being used to compile the data. There's other programs I'm sure that could be used to compile this data. And now with AI exploding, I just think there's real concerns that are legitimate about what kind of a big brother database they are putting together. And, Dana, as you know, I used to be a Republican. And I can tell you that at one time, the Republican Party didn't like Big Brother like programs and didn't like the idea, this kind of intrusion into our private lives and our data. And I don't think Republicans do. I know they don't. I know independents don't like it. I know Republicans don't like it. I know Democrats don't like it. So this is just something I think we need to keep an eagle eye on.
Oh, absolutely. And the more you see these programs where they're going to use your data to decide what the pricing is going to be for a product that
Right.
would be sold to you based on knowing all of your information. What do I think you could afford to buy this product for? That's what I'm going to sell it to you for. And so if you go online to try to purchase it, the price will be different depending on what information we know about you. And again, I certainly don't trust the federal government is going to be a good, safeguard for this information, because we already know how Doge is operated, and it's really scary. It's really scary to think of every single aspect of your life compiled together and used for what purposes we don't know. Will it be used by insurance companies to decide whether or not they're going to insure you, whether they're going to insure your home or your vehicle, or that you can get medical insurance? I don't know. And the thing is, nobody knows.
Nobody knows. I think that that is going to be one of the big storylines as we go on through this nightmare situation that we find ourselves in right now is what are they doing with the data and what can we do to unwind it when this is all over with? But Dana, I think we are running out of time. But this has been great to recap after the summer all the progress that we've been making and the other state AGs, Democratic AGs have been making on behalf of our states to prevent the harm and to uphold the rule of law and our Constitution.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to continue to file these lawsuits as long as we're in these offices, because we do recognize that it's the very best way to ensure that our constituents are protected and that we are doing our job, which is to uphold the rule of law.
Absolutely. So
All right.
that's all we have time for on this installment of Pantsuits and Lawsuits. Thanks for tuning in. Again, we are so glad to be back, part of the regularly scheduled time frame for our programming. Looking forward to the fall. I don't know about you, Dana, but it's gonna be interesting as ever.
Yes, it certainly promises to be, and we're going to keep up the good fight.
For sure. So don't forget to subscribe. Also, catch us on all your social media feeds, including YouTube, Instagram, all of them, I think. And until next time, keep fighting the good fight, one pantsuit, one lawsuit at a time. We'll see you guys soon.
Good to see you, Kris.
You too.